the watch list, I would be more adept to something like a 72-hour delayed for, a suspected terrorist, perpetrator. But until they can fix that, I'm not a fan of this at all. There are many things that need to be fixed at the ground level to get these things worked out before they can go nationwide. And that's just some of the things that happened here in the world recently. Thank you so much, and back to you, Leanne.
Well, after the Obama administration embarrassed the heck out of the Attorney General, paraded her around, said that they were going to release a partial transcript and why they were doing it, and then hours later, they went and released the full transcript because they knew they looked like fools. Well, now the Obama administration is doubling down on the fact that they're not going to say radical Islamic terrorism because it's a Republican political talking point, and that's why the president is not going to use it. Well, now there is a Muslim scholar speaking with Fox News who actually came out and said not calling out violent Islamism by name taints all Muslims. And by not calling it out, you're not making a separation within the community. So this means all Muslim people are now being tainted, and that the Muslim community needs to be engaged to help eliminate the extremists in their midst. But it's something that's not going to happen if the president refuses to call it out for what it is. But you know what? Black Lives Matter, they are saying it's white supremacy and capitalism. It had nothing to do with radical Islamic terrorism. This is a new Black Lives Matter. They put out their statement and they said it was due to supremacy, white supremacy, patriarchy, and homophobia of the conservative right. There you go, guys. And also the gun did it. Now, stick around because we got some more reports coming right up after this.
There are plans here in Texas to put through a high-speed bullet train going from Houston to Dallas. Now, that may sound like a good thing, and it could be a good thing, except that it's turning into the people who are in between the two cities, people in the rural areas, are literally being railroaded out of their private property rights. And without private property rights, you are nothing but a slave. This is another case of eminent domain, and we've seen through Supreme Court decisions, with the Kello decision, others, where increasingly eminent domain is being used not necessarily for public use, but for the private use of a corporation. And then we see with the Keystone Pipeline and now with this Japanese bullet train that is going to be built in Texas that they're working on, we're seeing that being handed over to a multinational corporation. Now, there's also been a bait and switch as we've seen this project develop here in Texas. We're going to talk to one of the judges, one of the county judges in one of the counties affected by this. And of course, a county judge in Texas is really the chief administrator. He's kind of like a mayor of a city. The county judge has that kind of a position in the counties here in Texas. We're talking to Judge Trey Duhan of Waller County, and he's going to outline to us what the problems are with this, because this is a national issue. And it is an issue that this country was built upon. This is the issue of whether or not you will be allowed to own and enjoy the rights to your property, or whether somebody who has better political connections is going to be able to take that from you at their will. Joining us now is Judge Trey Duhan. Now, let's give people an idea of how this has come about, because a few years ago, the people in these counties, when it was sold to them originally, they said, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Maybe this would be something that would be helpful. But at that time, they said it would be going over existing right-of-ways that were already being used by road beds, by power lines, and that sort of thing. But then they changed that.
That's right. I mean, when this first came about several years ago, because we've been engaged now in this fight now for going on, I think, 4 years. That was one of the things that a lot of folks felt pretty strong about, that if you're going to build something of this nature, you should build it along existing infrastructure rather than going out to an area that has a certain way of life and just taking land and condemning it and turning it into something that it's not. Obviously, with the bullet train, it comes along with a lot of other things that is not consistent with some of the things that we have here in Waller County. Obviously, Waller County is we've always been an agricultural county. We have a very strong rural and agricultural heritage. And we do have a lot of growth going on in Waller County, being that we're adjacent to Houston. But the areas that they're trying to run this train through, it would just create a dead zone. Instead of being prime residential development or mixed retail or other uses, any land adjacent to this project is going to, the highest and best use might be, grazing or agricultural. And that's a problem for a lot of folks in Waller County.
And of course, what it is also is a case of the rights of the few being taken by the multitude, and the way in which they're doing this. You have a lot of concerns about the process that they're going through with eminent domain and the fact that they're trying to take this property when they haven't even decided on the exact route yet. They're going to take property for a couple of different routes, and routes that they won't even use.
Yeah, that's right. And I tell you, it is disconcerting for a number of reasons. Obviously, you've got the two elephants in the room with Houston and Dallas that think that this would be the greatest thing, since white bread, and they're pushing very hard for this project. And the problem is that we have a number of issues with the project. I mean, number one, none of us really believe that this project is going to cash flow. It's being sold. The taxpayers are being told that this will be built with private money, but the fact of the matter is nobody can actually tell us if it's going to be operated that way or if the state of Texas will eventually have to subsidize this, because there's really no high-speed rail lines in the world that aren't publicly subsidized to some extent.
Yes.
It's not a mass transit solution, not at the ticket prices they propose. You're not going to get the ridership that you need when you can travel between Dallas and Houston on a $50 tank of gas. Why would a family of four pay over $1,000 for that same trip? So we have a number of issues, but what has really come to a head that is incredibly troubling is the actions of the rail company, Texas Central Railway, in filing these recent petitions with the Surface Transportation Board, where they are in effect asking to be exempted from certain regulations and requirements so that they can have the power of condemnation prior to the route being finalized and prior to the environmental analysis being completed, which, by the way, we have a major problem with the way they've done the environmental analysis, because we don't think what they're doing is in accordance with NEPA. But, that's a major side note. But, to think that and to go so far as to even admit that you may take property that you may not eventually use in the final route, I think that's tyranny, to be honest with you. I can't imagine. I mean, there has to be a public necessity.
Yes.
That's a basic tenet when you're going to exercise eminent domain.
Yes.
And if you're taking land that's not going to be used in the final route, where's the public necessity in that?
Well, I have a problem with the fact that it's a private company that's going to take it. I mean, you and I both don't believe that this is truly going to be a private company. What they will do is they will privatize their profits. But if they lose money, as we always see with these massive crony capitalist projects, if they lose money, that's going to be put on the public, on the taxpayer. But at the same time, if it is a private corporation that's running this thing through, I don't even believe that they ought to be able to take it for the eminent domain. But it's gotten beyond that. As we see, that first the private corporations take that, and then we have a multinational corporation, like in the case of Keystone Pipeline, comes in and says, well, we're going to take your property. Now we go to the extent they say, well, we've got a couple of different routes that we want to do here, so we're just going to take all of this land, even though we may not use some of it. And then they're taking shortcuts in terms of the eminent domain process, aren't they?
There's no doubt about it that they're taking shortcuts. And I'll give you just a few examples that I think, kind of outline the shortcuts they're taking. They, back in April, on April 19th is when they filed these petitions with the Surface Transportation Board to be exempted from certain regulations and to go forward and have that condemnation authority. They did so at that time with no notice to landowners, cities, or counties that were affected. And then they didn't come out until, I think it was on May 4th. That was 15 days after they filed it, but only 5 days before the deadline for comments on their petition is when TCR publicly announced that they had filed these petitions some 2 to
Wow.
3 earlier. And it's like, if it's an open and transparent process, which TCR says that they are doing, why doing this in the middle of the night without any heads up or notice to anybody? Now, thankfully, we are organized. We are not a bunch of backwoods hicks. We know what we're doing. We engaged quickly and filed replies and responses to these petitions, along with comments from thousands of individuals that own property between Houston and Dallas. And the point you made earlier, and let me say this is an important issue for everyone. Everyone that owns property, everybody that pays taxes, whether this project is going to come close to you or not, because you're right. They will absolutely, when this thing fails, and I do believe it's not going to cash flow. In fact, one of our state representatives, Cecil Bell, very interesting. If you look up his website, cecilbelljr.com, and go to the high-speed rail, he's actually put a calculator online where you can go and plug in numbers and you can see how this thing will not cash flow. It will not cash flow at whatever ticket prices and ridership, because it's just not going to happen. But it's like I try to tell people, it may not pass through your backyard, but it will pass through your pocketbook.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely will impact everybody in the state of Texas. So,
and it will impact everybody nationally, because we keep seeing this in different parts of the country. I mean, first it was in the Northeast. We saw this happening. Then we saw it happening in the Midwest with the Keystone Pipeline. Now we see it happening in Texas. And each time they go farther in the process.
This guy literally works 18 hours a day. And he says, well, I worked hard at other campaigns, but this one's so historical, so epic, I can't help it. This guy is amazing. And so he's here. Everything he's told us has turned out to be incredibly accurate, to tell us what the firing of Corey Lewandowski symbolizes, but moving on, where the Trump campaign's going, how we ensure this maverick patriot ends up getting in the White House. So Roger Stone of StoneZone.com, thank you so much for taking time out today.
Well, Alex, as you can imagine, I have several hundred press calls today from across the country, and everybody, which is very typical of the mainstream media, very focused on process, very focused on the who shot John of political intrigue, missing, I think, the larger implications. So I have elected, in all honesty, to lay low. I'm not going to take any press calls today. I'm going to do all my talking right here at INFOWARS.com. As you know, I've said for some time that the historical track record of presidential campaigns that had internal divisions and factions is not good. 8 years ago, when we had Mark Penn versus Mandy Grunwald fighting within Hillary's campaign for president, I think, frankly, it doomed them. You need to have the unity of command. A campaign cannot be a democracy. It has to be a dictatorship, and all power must flow from the candidate. The candidate's the ultimate boss. The candidate has the ultimate authority, and he needs to delegate that to one person, not a committee. So I have every confidence in Paul Manafort's ability to guide or help guide the Trump campaign to success, to victory. I also think that you are going to have a smoother flow of information to the candidate. Donald Trump is a thoroughbred with great instincts, particularly great instinct for the jugular. There is nobody better at counterpunching, and we're at a time in the campaign, Alex, that his entire issue has been validated. The fact that they are redacting these 911 calls to take out the references to ISIS and the leader of ISIS proves that Trump's criticism of the president of roughly a week ago is right on the money. They have another agenda. They will not even mouth the words except for when they absolutely have to.
Wow. Well, thank you for giving us this exclusive. Roger Stone, please, you've got the floor. We're going to skip this network break. Talk about issues that held things up if you can, but I agree we should just move forward. But folks do want to know, since you're making a statement, and then let's move forward from here. But what great news to know that your business partner in your political group has been helping the Trump campaign, but is now the head of the campaign. You, of course, formerly the head of the campaign. I have complete trust in you and Mr. Manford, so this is very exciting.
Well, Alex, I've said this to you before, both privately and on